The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Welcome to Sarah's Country on this fine and frosty evening, wherever you are in the fresh and fruity country of milk and honey, among other of the world's finest delicatessens that we produce here in beautiful Aotearoa, New Zealand. I'm your host, Sarah Perriam, and we love to do this live interactive show every weekday, Monday to Thursday from 7 o'clock. And I've found right here in your palms to play back on podcast in the morning. This is all thanks to the wonderful team at Global HQ, Farmers Weekly, from the most beautiful town in New Zealand once, Fielding. It's a great place, Fielding. Let me know if you've got a frost there, Fielding. I'd love to see in the comments below. As we are one big family wrapping around the matters that matter most to those farming, food and fibre. And sometimes it's frosty questioning. And other times it's just having a laugh, pulling your leg. What is frosty is this rioting around the country, looting, protesting around the world. Joel, holy moly, we are so sheltered. Well, I know I am sheltered, coming from rural New Zealand, I wouldn't even know the first thing about how to loot.
About a riot?
About a riot. I mean,
back where I'm from, it's a bit more of a thing. We just have a wee riot around this time every year. It's kind of a tradition at this stage.
So what? So on the calendar, you just go for a bit of a riot just because what?
Generally it's around the 12th of July, so the bonfire night, and it's a whole political thing I'll not get into, but there's generally like riot. Our police cars are like armoured cars, and we just call them like ice cream vans, and that's just how it is.
I do remember I was 12 years old. It was 97 when we travelled through Northern Ireland as a child, Joel. And there was like men standing outside banks with guns and things. I mean, would that have been right in the thick of it?
That would have been a wee bit after it. It was definitely worse a few years before that. I think it was the year I was born was when they signed the Good Friday Agreement to kind of calm things down a wee bit. So I grew up in a fairly peaceful Northern Ireland, but yeah, riots. We riot in July's pretty common.
So it's not all happy families, kumbaya yet.
Oh no, it's pretty good. But we're getting there.
And his peaceful, peace-loving father, who's a minister there in Northern Ireland, will be keeping that underway. So there you go. Always can find things to be grateful for. The likelihood of my house being bombed tonight and my car windows smashed is actually quite low. And I'm very grateful for that. And all of the bad press and negative news you see, I want Sarah's Country to be that place every night or first thing in the morning that is full of open hearts and open minds. We like to get the boot in on the big issues, but our arms are always out to catch those falling. So tonight I just thought, why not spread some gratitude sprinkled across the comments live wherever you are watching this? Because in our very special sector of the world, of New Zealand and of our economy, there are so many things to be grateful for. What are you grateful for today? Kick us off with some of our regulars. I know you like commenting. I think, it's just like a little bit of gratitude is like a smile. It spreads. So I'm going to give you my three. And Joel, I prepared you earlier for this question, Joel. So I'm grateful for a house soon I'm going to call home that has a heat pump. A family that is as mad as a cut snake, but many people wish that they could call their own. And, of course, the best producer a girl could ask for. Oh, and my teleprompter. Yeah, I'm very grateful for that. Joel?
I'll give you one now, and then we can go through and add a few more in later.
Good idea.
Yep, so I'm grateful to be in New Zealand right now. I'm not back home because, New Zealand's handled everything quite well, and I'm quite happy with that.
And you miss a good old bonfire around this time of year. So I'll make sure we have a good bonfire for you, Joel.
Good stuff.
Now, over 4,000 migrant workers are required to fill the gaps left by pre-COVID low unemployment. The lockdown has locked out 50 to 100 skilled migrants waiting to come back into this country. But now, with growing unemployment, farmers are going to now expect greater scrutiny from this government and, of course, immigration when applying when applying for migrant labour. Dairy NZ People Team Leader Jane Muir is going to join us after 7:20 to talk about this. A trial involving dairy bulls seeking to identify a link between methane and genetics is believed to be a world first. After 7:30, LIC Chief Scientist Richard Spellman and CRV Ambreed geneticist Phil Beatson will outline how this will provide more tools for farmers to their methane reduction toolkit. And to close the show, we're going to discuss a leaked news story that shows the uneven playing field New Zealand exporters were expected to play on in Europe. And it shows our long-running trade negotiations still haven't fixed the imbalance in volume restrictions. Special Agricultural Trade Envoy Mel Poulton is going to update us on why it's important to keep the pressure on Europe. But to start with, we're going to get an update across the board from the golden children of our sector, the kiwi fruit sector, from experienced agri-journalist for Global HQ from the Bay of Plenty, Richard Rennie. All that after a fantastic, heartwarming on-farm story that we just found from Reza Abdul-Jabbar, dairy farm migrants in Southland. Reza and his family are not only helping the environment, but have been helping those from the Christchurch mosque shootings with open minds and open hearts.
This is Sarah's Country.
By the time we finish milking, most people only about to start their work, yet we've milked 600 cows or 1,000 cows or whatever the numbers may be, and that's a great feeling knowing that we've got the head start. The way Islamic faith see farming is one of the best profession really. Islam perceives and views looking after livestock as good deeds. Us being a Muslims and a farmer, it's really the best of the both worlds. So that gives us the encouragement to farm the best that we can. We are Reza and Sylvia Abdul-Jabbar. We are dairy farming in Mokatua, Southland. We run 2 dairy farms. All the operations are within 10 minutes of each other. So pretty sweet spot to farm, but environmentally sensitive. We've got the Waituna Lagoon surrounding us. So we are really trying our very best to minimize the impact of the farming that we do. And supporting all the projects that we feel beneficial to the environment. In particular, the project called the Living Water. We work with Fonterra and Department of Conservation in retiring some of our lands. In this case, it's about 10.5 hectares. So that we can plant riparian plantings, creating habitat, reducing the sediments from the farming to the waterways, making sure that the creeks are sustained, and making sure really that this dairy farm that we run is commercially viable and the environment is pristine. So far, the result's been encouraging. We feel that more work like this needs to be done.
So he's been looking after that properly, eh?
Comes with the better cows, apparently.
That's nice. No, you should get to look after.
Sylvia's my better half. She's my wife, she's my best friend, and the mothers of the kids, and also our business partner. Early on in the piece, before she was farming, I did convince her a bit. But I think once she's felt the joy of running the place and rearing calves and then seeing them grow from young to a beautiful stock, the convincing is no longer needed. Couldn't have done it without her. The way we sit, both myself and Sylvia, we want to farm better, we want to grow grass better, we want to be better employers, we want to reduce the environmental impact of these farming operations. We feel like if we own something, let's pass it on to next generations better than when we received it. We've invested a lifetime into this farming, and we do believe we shall prevail.
How great was that on-farm story produced by Global HQ from Reza Abdul Jabbar? And of course, I know that they'll have a lot of things that they are extremely grateful for. That is what we're talking about tonight. Come on, you lot. All you have to do is one thing. I know you're not a miserable old bunch that watch Sarah's Country. Zespri Chief Executive Dan Matheson is upbeat, I'm sure very grateful as well, about the prospects of strong demand in global Asian markets for fresh fruit with high vitamin C and, of course, that protective skin that kiwi fruit have. This demand is providing the confidence for the big bucks that Zespri SunGold licenses are going for. Now, joining us from Tauranga is a Global HQ journalist, and he has a specialist cap in the kiwi fruit industry, Richard Rennie. Good evening, sir.
Hi Sarah, how are you going?
Good. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight.
No problem.
Richard, lots to cover in terms of there's lots going on in the kiwi fruit industry, but let's start with COVID-19 and how the growers and pack houses navigated processing of fruit from your perspective.
Yeah, well, as an industry that's sort of not that long out of the PSA disaster of 2011, you've got to wonder if maybe there was some lessons learnt there that put it in a good state for the latest crisis. On the dawn of the kiwi fruit harvest season in mid-March, we had COVID come along and pretty much locked down all the pack houses and processing processes that you could in terms of how many staff you could employ and social distancing and everything else we all had to put up with. And as did the meat companies, the kiwi fruit pack houses had about all of less than a week to reconfigure and work out how they were going to try and harvest one of the biggest crops they've ever had. And within about a matter of literally days, they were back in business and pretty much up to 90% capacity, I think, in about 7 to 10 days all up, and hummed through the crop. So it was remarkable, really, and pretty admirable, really, given that nobody saw this coming in any shape or form, really.
So attracting labour into the kiwi fruit industry from redeploying those unemployed Kiwis over COVID didn't seem to be so much of a problem. Why do you think that is in comparison to the challenges the dairy industry are facing?
Yeah, good question. I guess, I suspect maybe it's because the kiwi fruit industry is fairly defined. It sort of sits about 80% of your production comes out of the Western Bay of Plenty here still, although it is shifting a little. But I guess you have a number of small towns sort of scattered from one end. If one end is Waihi and the other end is, let's say, Wakatani, there's a number of urban centres where people can base themselves, or you can source people from to come out to work in your orchards and pack houses. Maybe it's a bit more of a remote exercise to go to a dairy farm that might be some distance from town and have to base yourself there. I mean, I guess for the kiwi fruit sector, you can stay living where you are and commute to work like you do for any other job. So it's a bit of a different it's a rural lifestyle, but a different sort of rural lifestyle income, yeah.
Yeah, and of course,
I think that makes a difference. Yeah.
Seasonal as well. Did the kiwi fruit industry have to up their game in terms of pay to attract this level?
They didn't seem to. Typically, the industry struggled to get locals employed. Of about the 20-odd thousand people that work in it every season, about half, 10,000 have been local. The last couple of years, there's been big efforts by New Zealand kiwi fruit growers to try and get more locals engaged. But I guess a function of good employment levels in the Bay of Plenty and everywhere else, it's been harder to do. This year, they've managed to average about 70% Kiwis in pack houses and harvesting. So a big jump in some areas, apparently even as high as 90%. So yeah, they've managed to get people engaged, maybe who have lost work elsewhere, looking for work, or maybe temporarily stood down from their work, and fill some big holes, despite not having about 1,200 RSE workers from overseas that never actually got over the border to get here. So yeah, it was a pretty good effort without any major changes in pay rates either, I don't think. I mean, the industry starts off at a minimum, but you can jump up fairly quickly as you get more skilled, yeah.
Those Zespri SunGold licence holders from early on will be pretty stoked with the results of this closed tender licence. Could you explain about that?
Well, if you go way back to when they first started auctioning, tendering off the SunGold fruit, I think the very early licences were going for about $7,000 a hectare, I think. We're going back 6-7 years now. The latest round has just closed off this week, the tender round, and the fruit gets, for anyone that's maybe not familiar with it, the fruit gets sold off as you buy a hectare, a license to grow a hectare of sun gold kiwi fruit, and the latest round is closed off at 400,000 a hectare, just basically to have the right to grow sun gold
Richard,
kiwi
can I just
fruit.
interrupt? Joel's eyes, if I could, they just went.
Yeah. Tell them they're called gold for a reason. Yeah. You need gold to grow them. Yeah. So yeah, it's $1,000 last year, which is high. I think the really interesting thing is there was 700 hectares put up for tender, but it was oversubscribed to the tune of 950 hectares. So still an appetite there at those dollars, but just not enough to. Zesbury's been very careful in controlling the supply of the fruit growth, because it is a prolifically heavy cropping fruit, so that they don't flood the market and lower the price as a result. So constantly trying to keep demand just a little bit ahead of supply and keep prices high, which is good marketing management. Yeah.
And always have admired them as the absolute leaders in doing that, achieving premium and adding value. So how is the global markets looking? I mean, we just spoke there earlier about that demand for that vitamin C in those Asian markets.
Yeah, well, it really has been a week of kiwi fruit, hasn't it? And just tonight, Zesbury released their financial report for the year end 2019-20. $3.4 billion of gross revenue, of which 3.1 is of fruit income. It's good. I mean, that's putting it on a path to probably almost eclipse either sheep meat or beef within maybe 2 to 3 years, which I think respectively are about $4 billion apiece. So yes, it's coming from a sector that seems to be, only yesterday it was a $2 billion industry, and we thought that was a big deal. Yes, they're very strong in all markets. There's 3 markets that they sell more than 20 million trays: Japan, China, and interestingly Spain has come out of almost nowhere to claim a big chunk of the market for Zesbury fruit. Spanish go nuts for it, and the Japanese, for their part, don't eat a lot of fruit. They're an aging population and a shrinking population, and have had a growth of 10% a year in demand for Zesbury kiwi fruit for the last 5 years. So it's really interesting where some of these quirks of the market are coming out. Yeah.
And of course, naturally, anything that grows in popularity is up for counterfeit products. Richard, earlier when we spoke, I was very interested in the weight that Zesbury have in China, in market, to throw their weight around.
Yeah, well, Zesbury have managed one of the perennial problems with growing fruit or any produce, as anyone that's farming or growing in New Zealand knows, is you can only supply it for a certain portion of the year often, particularly if it's a fresh product. Zesbury's done a good job in with strong relationships with Italian and French growers to grow it on our off season, so they can keep the fruit on the shelf all year round. But one of the unwanted areas where the fruit's being grown is in parts of China where the sun gold fruit has been essentially planted and grown in orchards to the tune of over 1,000 hectares of the fruit now, essentially being grown illegally without a license. There are plans to ultimately grow legally in China, but that's still some way off. Zesbury's been given a mandate from the Chinese government through a change in the consumer law that basically gives them the opportunity to wield a bigger stick to try and get hold of those growers that are growing illegally, and I guess ultimately pull those crops out, because it's a pretty big area of fruit to be growing where you didn't expect it to and don't want it. You have no control over it. So yeah, that's an interesting one, and I guess one of the challenges of growing a biological product, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. And lastly, Richard, this red kiwi fruit is getting a lot of excitement.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool fruit. It's been a long time coming. Every year at the field days, as Zesbury CEO would say to us at the media discussion, the red fruit's coming, it's coming. And anyway, it is here this year with the tender process, a little eclipsed by gold's $400,000 hectare price, but the first tranche of red fruit, 150 hectares, were put up for tender, and they went on average for $62,000, so a hectare. So, and even then, the amount supplied, the amount that the growers wanted versus the amount they could acquire was oversubscribed. So yeah, really, I think it's an exciting one. It's a very there's an enthusiasm there by growers to have a go at it. It's a smaller fruit. It's doesn't keep. There's no secrets behind its faults. It doesn't keep as well. Its fruit's a bit smaller. It doesn't crop as heavily. But as Dave Courtney from Zesbury said to me yesterday, he said, "Look, you give New Zealand growers a fruit that's just been trialled, and they'll always make it better than it was when you trialled it, just through better growing techniques and good management." So yeah, and it tastes great too. It's an awesome taste. It's more like a berry than a kiwi fruit. It's quite different, yeah.
Oh,
But
it's
good.
so
Yeah.
fantastic how innovative we are across all the different sectors, and particularly all the learnings we can take from the kiwi fruit industry if we're not in it. And if you are and you got in early, good on you. I'm sure you'll be very grateful for that.
Yeah, it's a good time to be in it, yeah.
Yeah, thanks so much for taking the time to join us, Richard. That's Richard Rennie, agri-journalist for Global HQ, and of course a lot of Richard's stories you can find in Farmers Weekly, the newspaper, or farmersweekly.co.nz. Now, up next on Sarah's Country, we're going to be talking about our migrant dairy workers, those who are locked out of the country due to COVID, who desperately need to get in, and where on earth are we going to find these people to milk the cows and calve the cows in such a short amount of time? The rise of unemployment is one thing, but to train them in time is another. All that up next.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
One of the first things you learn when you live out here
is where to shop for the things you need to live out here.
like electric fencing,
or horse feed,
or bee suits,
children, chook food.
Do you want a couple of these?
or something stylish to wear. Not everyone's got stuff like this, but at Farmlands we do, and then some.
So if you need anything to help your farm,
Grow, milk, drench.
Rhea, come on in.
Because we're out here too.
Well, as many of you will be aware, the dairy industry's labour force has been made up predominantly of migrant workers. And of course, with COVID-19 locking down our borders, with many of them locked out to return pre-calving, there is a lot of pressure on where this labour shortage will be filled by. Jane Muir is the people team leader for Dairy NZ and joins us now on Sarah's Country. Good evening, Jane. How are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah.
It's a bit of a worry. Chris Lewis here from Federated Farmers has been pushing the government, who the response has said there will be greater scrutiny over farmers trying to apply for visas when there's plenty of unemployed Kiwis for these jobs. Is it really that hard to train up our Kiwis into the dairy force rather than relying on our migrant workers?
Well, it's very hard to do on the spin of a wheel, yes. So currently we have about 25% of our employees are migrants, but about 5 or 6% of those are residents, so they're safe. But we do have about 4,500 migrants on temporary work visas, and they range from all level positions, but some of them are very highly skilled, can't be replaced within years even, through to people that could be replaced, but not in a month, more like a year. So we're looking to come to a solution to figure that one out.
Yeah, and of course, it's good to see that migrant workers that have been in a position for longer than 3 years are now non-deemed low-skilled and should be safe. However, what about some of those migrant workers who have only been in the job a year or so?
So currently, if you're, it's a complicated system, but effectively, if you're highly skilled, you're on a 3-year visa, and if you're lower skilled, you're on a 12-month visa. So the government, there is some new policy coming in which will make that a bit clearer. It'll be wages used as proxy to determine what the skill level is, but that won't come through till late July. People that are on a 1-year visa obviously more exposed, although so we're just, at the moment, visas are being processed. So government is processing them pretty quickly at the moment, recognising that calving is upon us. But we're looking for certainty now and through the next sort of 6 to 12 months, because we are so reliant on that migrant workforce. And the reason we have the migrant workforce is because unemployment rates have been so low. So this is not something that dairy farmers set out to have such a large migrant workforce. We've ended up with one out of necessity, and now we can't simply undo all that work. And of course, it's also worth, our migrants are really valued. They've played a very key role in the dairy sector and therefore the New Zealand economy. So we have, it's quite heart-wrenching, some of these decisions that we will be faced with over the coming year as well.
And the rise of the migrant workers got nothing to do with lower pay at all. I mean, I was humbled to see that the median farm worker was around the 57,000 mark per annum. Am I correct on that? I mean, it's good pay compared to some other industries.
Yeah, compared to many sectors, we stack up very favourably on pay. And no, that's not the reason that we've got the migrant workers. The reason we've got them is low unemployment rates across New Zealand. Things like sort of urbanisation, like a lot of Kiwis have been looking to move from rural into urban settings. And obviously our farms aren't urban, so it's not where they're located. So it's simply a case of we haven't been able to find people to fill the roles. And so therefore migrant workers have filled that gap. But, we now, farm teams and our sector is, they're people as well. So it's just quite tough decisions. We're looking at a situation where we are reliant on our existing migrant dairy workforce, but we also have roles for Kiwis. So it's fitting the pieces of the puzzle together. We've got room for everyone. We do expect to see New Zealandisation, if you want to call it, over, in the coming years, but we can't make that happen in 6 months, and we certainly can't make it happen in time for calving, which is nearly upon us.
And are the government listening to you on that fact? I mean, they've been rushing through visas for our Avatar film crew coming here. There's talk about the same for America's Cup crew coming. I mean, dairy migrant workers that can immediately fix that short-term problem should be granted at least temporary visas.
Yeah, so we've been heavily focused, and people might have seen in the media, we have about 40 mid or highly skilled migrants who were stuck out of the country when the borders shut. So they were just simply on holiday visiting family. So we've been applying a lot of pressure to get those people home. The farms that they work on are heavily reliant on them, and as a result, that means our sector, they can't just be replaced, because if they move, if those farmers recruit somebody else to fill their place, it just creates a shortfall on that farm. Those skills aren't highly replaceable. So yes, we've been doing that. I think government are listening. They recognise there is a challenge, but all these decisions for exemptions across the border have been being made at a cabinet level. So we're looking for that to change and it to become more operational, and for them to recognise that the amount that dairy contributes to the New Zealand economy, this is critical. These people back in time for calving, and that means decisions made in the next week or two so that they can quarantine safely. We, as much as anyone else, don't want to see a return to any sort of lockdown, so we're absolutely focused on ensuring that anyone comes back and there's no COVID risk.
Okay, long term planning into the future. This the need for workers is not a COVID problem, Jane, and so therefore training facilities and potentially the reopening of Taratahi is very positive. Can you give us a bit of an understanding of how busy you've been at Dairy NZ, not only with that training but also to public relations campaign nationally as well?
Yeah, the wheels are turning at Dairy NZ. That's been true ever since, well, it was true before we went into lockdown, and lockdown pushed us into overdrive, and it hasn't let up. So, yep, we're very my area, so the area of people, workforce and workplace, particularly hot topical issues. So we have been and are launching our Go Dairy campaign, which is about attracting Kiwis to our sector. This week on Monday, we launched the beginning of our Go Dairy Farm Ready training, which is a 3-week training program designed to give people who are changing careers an idea of what dairy looks like. What would it be like working on farm? What can they expect to do day to day? What are the opportunities? That's week 1, is sort of more covers that off. Week two is about animal handling, so animal husbandry and infrastructure on farm, particularly the milking shed. And week 3 is about vehicle safety. So we've kicked that off. The week 1, I should add, we expect to see some dropout. So the weeks don't have to follow each other. We want people to know that dairy is a good fit for them before they commit to our sector. That makes sense. But as you mentioned, Taratahi, back up and running. We're very pleased to welcome them back. There's been a gap without the Taratahi facilities operating. So they are part of that farm ready training. So there is a residential option for people who want to live in to go to Taratahi or Telford. And of course, over the coming months and years, we should see Telford and Taratahi also do a broader training opportunities for people.
I was just thinking to close, Jane, just putting a bit of a political spin on it, and please answer however you wish. How strong this particular government is going to be on the ability to simply get the dole rather than the high cost of relocating into the regions when there is actual work available. Is there any sort of work that we can do there with WINS to ensure that it's easy for people to relocate to the regions?
Look, I think there's already set up through MSD and the like, there are some abilities for people to be assisted to move into regions on a case-by-case basis. Lucky or unlucky, depending which way, COVID's had a pretty broad impact across New Zealand. So we are probably anticipating that a lot of the people that will come onto dairy farms, they won't necessarily have to move far. They may only be moving smaller distances because jobs have been lost across the country. We will wait and see how it pans out, what the unemployment rate really looks like. We know in dairy there will be jobs, there are jobs now. We need people right now. I had a quick look on Farm Source this afternoon. 754 jobs on dairy farms up on Farm Source as of today. 337 of those are farm assistants. So that is entry-level positions, and not all jobs are advertised on Farm Source.
I was going to say I actually had a look on Seek in Canterbury, and it is rural contractors and dairy farm workers in Canterbury. You could have your pick.
Yes. So we're just saying to people, look, the jobs are there. Come and find out, do our farm ready training. Find out if you don't know about dairy, find out if it's a good fit for you. And if in fact it is a good fit for you, then jump into weeks 2 and 3, get some practical experience so that when you land on farm, you're safe to be on farm. And we just want to set people off on that really great step. We hope that whoever is in government will support us in making sure that our dairy farmers can farm successfully and safely, because we are such a big contributor to the economy. And so supporting dairy farming is a cracking thing to be doing right now.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Sarah's Country tonight. That's Jane Muir. She's head of the people team at Dairy NZ. Now, staying on the theme of dairy, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking to two gentlemen, Chief Scientist for LIC, Richard Spellman, and geneticist for CRV Ambreed, Phil Beatson, both very upbeat about the release of new research that's about to kick underway to find low methane cows. So that's going to be really, really interesting. Stick around for that.
This is Sarah's Country.
Joel just said to me, don't say what you just said off air live. I said, no, I will. No one is commenting, telling me what they're grateful for. You know, I know that you're not all a bunch of miserable bastards. So get in those comments and tell me what you are grateful for. We live in the best country, COVID-free, at the bottom of the world, in the most amazing, pristine paradise. I'm just giving you a few. Anyway, there's a few of you that I know will share some of gratitude sprinkled across the comments. It's just a wonderful thing to do. We'll talk about, inches of rainfall tomorrow. I promise. If we can establish that there is a variability of methane emissions between New Zealand's dairy bulls that can be linked back to their genetics, the opportunity is awesome to be able to utilise this variability to breed cows with lower methane emissions. Fantastic. The trial announced will involve dairy breeding bulls and is believed to be a world first and is being run by Livestock Improvement Corporation, LIC, and CRV Ambreed, which together are going to collaborate to Together, they do sire 90% of New Zealand's dairy herd, and they're collaborating on this project. The project that is funded through the New Zealand Agricultural Greenhouse Gas Research Centre as well. So joining us now in a double header is Richard Spellman, Chief Scientist for LIC and geneticist from CRV Ambreed, Mr. Phil Beatson. Welcome, gentlemen, and thank you for joining Sarah's Country tonight.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Okay, Richard, I'll kick this off with you. How long ago did the concept of this begin?
Yeah, Sarah, so it probably about 2 years ago. So we had the opportunity of a discussion with CRV. So Phil was up our way and we talked about this was an issue that was facing us as an industry. And we were very keen that the two breeding organisations really spent time together and developed a protocol where we'd actually take an industry approach rather than being sort of competitive in the science, where we can compete in the marketplace, but let's bring our two science teams together. So Phil, myself, and another scientist, Lorna McNaughton, we travelled around the world and looked at what other people were doing, certainly in dairy cattle, but also in other species, of how they were measuring methane and how they were going about trying to address this problem. And after that trip, we came back and we took the best of what we saw from around the world and came up with a trial that we have started this year.
Phil, why is a project of this significance important and will contribute in the long run to us reducing our overall greenhouse gases?
Well, New Zealand has some obligations under the various climate agreements to reduce our emissions. And agriculture makes up approaching 50% of New Zealand's emissions. So there's a requirement for agriculture to reduce the emissions. And dairy, of course, is one of those major agricultural activities in New Zealand. So reducing dairy's impact is critical. And we see genetics to reduce methane per kilogram of feed eaten as certainly a stretch, but an activity we have to pursue for New Zealand agriculture to meet its emissions targets.
So, Richard, how do you go about measuring inputs and then, of course, that output, that methane?
Yeah, so it's a really important thing that one needs to do. So two key things for us, firstly, is measuring feed intake. And one of the issues that we have in New Zealand is our animals are outdoors and eating grass predominantly. So, and to estimate feed intake from a grazing diet is nearly impossible to do accurately as we need to do. So what we've done is we've taken the animals, in this case the progeny test bulls, and put them in to a barn type system. And so LIC, we've built a barn and CRV have one existing. And we're measuring, so we're giving them lucerne pellets. And the reason we're choosing lucerne is from previous research that we've done with Dairy New Zealand, that's the most comparable one that we've had to pasture. And also means you can be very objective in the measurement. So we're feeding the animals pellets and we measure every time that they visit the feeding bin of how much they've eaten. So the feed intake is really important. And then the second one really is measuring the methane output. And so around the world, we saw probably the best way of doing that in this for livestock was a system called the CLOC system, and it comes from the United States. And so we have a special pellet on or treat really for the animals in this contraption. And so they can go and visit the CLOC, the green feed machine. And at the time when they just eat a little bit of feed, we capture their breath. And that's captured in their breath, because that's where 95% of methane emissions occur. And we can measure quite accurately their methane emission. And if they visit that system 5 or 6 times a day, we get repeated measures through the day. And that means we get a very accurate measurement of both their methane emission and also we measure their intake. And as Phil was saying before, then we can look at if there's differences in methane emission per kilogram of dry matter that each of these animals are eating.
Is it relative to grass? I mean, you know, sometimes when I eat certain foods, the smell changes a bit. So is methane is equivalent to what it would be if it was grass, these pellets?
Yes, so the work that we've done previously with Dairy New Zealand on a feed conversion efficiency is that feeding the lucerne pellet is the most comparable way to feeding pasture, and it's far more objective in the measurement that we can undertake. So yes, they are comparable, absolutely.
Phil, Harry Clark, the director of the New Zealand Greenhouse Gas Research Centre, is very pleased to support this project. How important do you believe science collaboration is in areas of such big challenges?
Well, this particular project would be extreme, assuming that it runs its course, as we expect following this year's pilot trial. It's going to be an expensive undertaking. It's to the national good that it is done, but it's probably very expensive for individual companies to take or to fund themselves. So having a collaborative approach with industry, with New Zealand government funding through greenhouse gas is critical, and we've got to do a good job and work with Harry to make sure we do it as well as we can. I'd just like to expand that conversation a little, so to pick up something that Richard said earlier. When we visited scientists at several institutions in the Northern Hemisphere a couple of years ago, one thing that struck me, and I think Richard and Warner, was the international willingness to collaborate on this really important topic. So it's not just LIC and CRV. Richard might like to comment, but I think there's real goodwill internationally on this.
Yeah, Richard, absolutely. I mean, this is a global project potentially as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. So there are certainly some of our collaborators in Ireland. So they are doing similar work as well at the stage of beef animals, and Australia, Canada, and the Netherlands as well. So, you know, Phil's right. This is a a collaboration that we're certainly starting out domestically, and we will then look through time to combine our data sets potentially with others around the world to enhance everybody trying to reduce the methane outputs.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for taking the time to join us. Phil, sorry, I'm really sorry we have to go, but I really appreciate it. And if you'd like to find out more about this project, head to farmersweekly.co.nz. There is an article up there all about the wonderful project that is a collaboration between not only LIC and CRV Ambreed, but of course utilising the best brains in New Zealand, Abacus Bio, Agri Search, Dairy NZ. There's a number of them as well. This is a very exciting time, and great to hear that we are, again, world leaders. We've had a lot of world leaders on this show. That's because you're watching Serious Country, and that's how we roll. Now, comments. I did stir you up. Good work. No, grateful to have an awesome job in Terrace from Anna McMunro. I've been in the same position, Anna, to be very grateful to be based in Terrace. Beef and Lamb, New Zealand, North Island, which I think I know who that is. He said, fresh air. We should be very grateful for fresh air. And Michael Ross has said he's not just grateful, but very pleased that Kiwis have been responsible to find a baseline. Reaching this base has been the easiest part. The hard part is maintaining the security and what we face. I think that he's referring to COVID-19. Absolutely, we should be extremely grateful. As Joel reminds me every day, he's very grateful to be here in New Zealand and not home in Northern Ireland at the moment, but I'm sure he will want to get back there. Let us know in the comments below, because you know what? The struggle ends when gratitude begins. Believe it or not. Now, after the break, to close the show, we're going to get a little kind of cheesy with Mel Poulton, Special Agricultural Trade Envoy, and the unfair playing field when it comes to the trading of cheese with Europe.
This is Sarah's Country.
Everyone's been talking about food these days.
While we've been busy stacking shelves, there's a whole team behind us.
But it's hard work too.
And we don't grow it without help.
Nutritious food needs nutrients. Our soil tells us that story.
By testing, we know what the soil needs.
We make the nutrients right here in New Zealand.
And we've got it
when you need it.
And we get it to where it needs to go.
As farmers, we have a really important role in turning sunshine and water and nutrients into an edible product, and we don't take that lightly.
It's great to know we're putting food on the New Zealand dinner table.
So we can all come together.
We've got to play our part in keeping the farmers growing what they grow, whether it be grass or fruit and vegetables.
Pleased to be part of the production line that keeps the industry moving and keeps people being fed.
I have been speaking to a farmer and they appreciate what we're doing.
They're really happy that at this critical time of the year for their autumn applications, our stores and supply networks have stayed open.
You're proud and privileged to be part of the team.
Thanks for the hard work, team. Let's dig in. And let's do it all again tomorrow. Cheers.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey. Do you reckon it'll come out? Cover it in talcum powder, leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Well, on the show, we have increasingly been talking about the growing protectionism around the world, and of course, some of the failing trade negotiations that haven't been sort of meeting the rules of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. But in recent news this week, Minister David Parker of Trade is very disappointed and upset about some leaked news in some European media around New Zealand's sort of raw end of the stick, let's say, when it comes to our trade of cheese. Joining us to discuss this is Special Agricultural Trade Envoy Mel Poulton. Good evening, Mel.
Good evening, Sarah.
Now, as I was just sort of saying to you there in the break, you must be a very busy woman in the evening, speaking to a lot there around the world, keeping pulse on what's going on.
Yeah, there's conversations in all sorts of different ways, and as everyone is aware, during COVID there was certainly a lot of demand on using the internet to be able to do things that you'd otherwise be doing face to face.
Thank God for the trusty copper there.
I don't know. I've been sitting on the side of the road a fair bit with the hotspot going, or having to go and flog internet data off my mates down the road, or it certainly hasn't been ideal. But anyway, you work with what you got.
I love the links that you go to for our country, Mel. Thank you so much. Do you know what I'm going to get you for Christmas? There's a certain stock agent, very old, and everybody will know his name, and he has a jug that plugs into the 12 volt. That he
brilliant. Yes, indeed.
Yes, yeah. So you can sit there, have your cuppa. Anyway, on to
I like that idea.
Yes, on to serious business. There's been a bit of sort of shock to the system of this news coming out through informal mail.
Yeah, they're not ideal. Certainly not ideal, and it would be fair to say that everyone in New Zealand is pretty upset about it.
So let's talk about that news in regards to how uneven this is, and put it in perspective of, as they have in the Farmers Weekly article, cheese per citizen.
Yeah. I was talking to the decans guys the other day, and they've put out some really great stats, and they were talking about how the EU is the world's largest dairy exporter, and they export more than New Zealand's total annual dairy production each year. And their domestic market for cheese is 8.85 million tonnes for 2018, and it's growing at about 132,000 tonnes per annum. And that starting offer that the EU has leaked regarding the dairy thing was around 1,500 tonnes, which equates to about 0.02 of the EU's domestic consumption. So it's pretty grim, really. And they export to New Zealand about 900 grams of cheese per New Zealand citizen, duty free, and by comparison, in their offer, it equates to about 3.3 grams per European citizen, and for us, and not at all duty free.
So effectively, they're allowed to sell us a block, and we're only allowed to sell them a crumb.
Well, you could say that. It's a bit rugged, and but the thing is that we really want to point out is that even though we're pretty upset about this isn't the be all and end all of the trade negotiation, and it's certainly not an agreed situation. And there's more negotiations, to happen and underway. So we'll just keep working through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that the dairy industry and decans, as you explained, the dairy companies of New Zealand and, of course, federated farmers are very hot on keeping the foot to the pedal and ensuring a fair trade agreement with the EU, Mel. What still has to happen?
When we started out, both the EU and New Zealand were talking about, having a deal that was deep, was comprehensive, and of high quality. And we've got to keep doing that. And now with what COVID's done around the world, that's even more important, for both the EU and for New Zealand. And as you well know, the ministers announced the COVID recovery, really relying a lot on trade and agricultural trade in particular. So So this is important to New Zealand, and just as it is important to the EU for them to trade their way through an economic recovery as well.
Will there be anything specific that they will change to be able to get that volume over brand and geographical indicators change across the line? So, for instance, selling more but not calling it certain names.
Well, I'm not I'm not a trade negotiator per se, and I'm not in those conversations. But I'm confident that our trade negotiators are doing an outstanding job, and they're pretty skilled up on what they do. And this is an unfortunate situation, particularly for the EU. I'm sure this is not the way they would have liked it to have been done. But it is what it is, and I'm confident that our team will not take their foot off the pedal.
Let's jump across the Tory Channel to the UK, Mel.
Yeah.
How's things progressing in Brexit land?
In Brexit land, they're still, they've obviously officially left the EU on 31st of January 2020, earlier this year. And they're in this transition period at the moment, which is going to run till the 31st of December this year, unless, of course, they agree to extend it. But Prime Minister Johnson hasn't ruled that out yet. So that's what they're targeting, and they're just working through all of the bits and pieces and details of how they're actually going to operate once that deadline's been reached.
And you're feeling confident around our deals in terms of those new negotiations post-Brexit?
Look, the National Farmers Union in the UK, along with their trade ministers and government, have all talked about the need for trade as being important, and their trade ministers also talked about how they're wanting to undertake trade negotiations with New Zealand, and so we're ready, and they've got to work through a little bit of the finer details around their, the Brexit relationship with the EU, and we will do our darndest to get a really good deal for New Zealand in that space too.
Fantastic. Mel, I just want to throw you one just to close. We're talking about gratitude and what we should be grateful for farming and food and fibre at the bottom of the world. I'd love to know, when you're on the phone to a lot of these places around the world, what are some of those things that, those conversations that you have where they're surprised at how we operate differently and how our farming is valued globally, to give some light and hope to our farmers watching?
Well, look, I think one of the biggest strengths, and this certainly comes up in the conversations I have, is their amazement at how closely we work together in New Zealand, and in particular, that public-private partnership between the New Zealand primary industry and the government. It's pretty important how we work together, and one of the key ones that really blew them away when Mike Peterson and I were in Europe late last year is, how we managed to get this public-private partnership with the Hiwaki Kanoa project, and that just amazes a lot of people. And I think some of our strengths that we've got to really leverage on is that we have a pretty easy access to our politicians. Anyone can ring them up and have a chat with them, whereas in some other countries that's not quite the same. They're a lot further removed and harder to get hold of. So I think this is a huge asset to New Zealand, and we've got to be really thankful for that. And we've got to, as with the freshwater policy that's just been sort of released, there's been a lot of indication in that the government's listened to quite a bit of that feedback, and that's a huge plus, and we've got to be thankful for that.
What a great way to end. Thank you so much, Mel. Are you grateful for rain?
I'm very grateful for rain. Oh my goodness. Yep, we're certainly not out of the woods yet, but we've had a bit of rain, and it's made a huge difference. And with sunny days like today, even though it was a bit of a frost, I think the grass is still trying to grow, so that's very encouraging.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Mel Poulton, the Special Agricultural Trade Envoy there. Now, I love to end the show. Joel, you told me you were going to come up with a few more things that you're grateful for by the end of the show. I can give you some time because I've got a few things to read out. Jock Innes has said he is very grateful for his father's dedication to contributing to the protection of our freedom during World War II. Grateful for his upbringing in the amazing high country. The activities and lifestyles have been a great journey. He's grateful for a good education, his children, his good health, and his good friends. Oh, wonderful. Well written, Jock. Joel, rock.
Well, it's going to be tough to follow that. I'm pretty grateful for my wonderful girlfriend, because I'll get a slap if I don't say that. And I'm grateful, and as a reminder to our viewers, we won't be here next week. And I'm grateful for a week off. So
well done, Joel. We got through the whole show forgetting to tell people that, yes, that's correct. We're taking a week off, and this is for our own energy levels to ensure that we can crank into 3 months leading into this very important election in September, but also too because me and Joel didn't actually have a lockdown, and so we decided because it's my father's 60th, that family come first, and we will be back with you on the 22nd of May. But of course, there's one more show tomorrow night. And we have lots installed, an international guest from the Netherlands who is going to tell us how her and our field research says that women in agriculture in New Zealand have a lot more opportunity and are heard at the table than they are in the Netherlands. As well as Hamish Walker's going to join us, sticking the boot in regards to what's happening behind closed doors in Cabinet with our ETS and our forestry submissions that have gone largely unheard. A lot on Sarah's Country and more tomorrow night. But of course, anything on demand, you can go back on podcasts or Farmers Weekly on YouTube at any point in time. And of course, all of these great stories prepared by Farmers Weekly's very experienced agri-journalists and analysts at farmersweekly.co.nz. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here tonight on Sarah's Country. Flick me an email, sarah@perryandmedia.com. I'd love to hear from you, your feedback and your suggestion for guests. Good night, go well, and you know what? Just be grateful.
This is Sarah's Country.